Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know we've been meeting a lot of Mondays in a row, but there's a lot going on, and so I greatly appreciate you taking the time to meet tonight. We've been meeting continually with the county health department to understand what the guidance is for school districts, and then as La Crosse County superintendents, we've also been meeting on a regular basis to discuss what that means for our schools. The superintendents in West Salem, Onalaska, Holman, and Bangor and La Crosse have been meeting regularly because the county's guidance affects all of us as public schools. And we want to make sure that we are generally on the same page so that we can avoid controversy between our school districts and to avoid open enrollment between school districts where conditions are significantly different and parents feel forced to make a choice that disadvantages a school district in particular. So we've been working very closely to try and make that happen. With the latest guidance that we have and based on the school districts in La Crosse County, bottom line up front, it is our intention at this time to reopen schools virtually on September 1st for the first 30 calendar days and reassess for October throughout the month of September. So that's the headline as far as that goes. And then I can talk about how we got there because it's been a long process and we're still learning more, but I want people to understand, what we've kind of been through. So like I said, we've met with the county health department frequently over the last couple of months. And it's always helpful for me to remind myself that, this is a public health crisis, not a public education crisis. And as a result, we have to lean on the experts at the health department. They're the folks who can tell us what is safe and what isn't safe. They are experts in public health. We as educational experts are not. And so we really need to lean on them. And for them, as their understanding of the situation has changed, so has their guidance. And to be honest, this is a good thing. It can be frustrating from time to time, but as they learn more about the disease, they respond and change what they need to keep all of us safe. And right now we're in the midst of another one of those changes in our guidance. We had anticipated something today, but a little more review is necessary by the county. And so we're not going to get their updated guidance until later this week. And our plans are based on their guidance. That being said, I think we can commit to what we have already. And the health department determines what is safe based on current understanding of how the virus works, hospitals' ability to treat people who are sick, our ability to prevent further spread of the virus, and the availability of protective equipment. So they're looking at a lot of different factors, and education has to be aware of that and work with what their recommendations are. And the big thing is that it's the conditions in the community that determine whether schools can reopen, not our own preferences. We know that we deliver incredible in-person instruction and we want to for every one of our children, but it's the conditions in the county that determine that, not what we would prefer. And given what has been shared with us to date and the current conditions in the county, we're in the red, the most severe category on the compass. We can anticipate that we will be in the red or the orange at best in La Crosse County come September 1st. Based on what we're learning, we think that is highly likely. Things could change in the county, absolutely, but with the information that we have to date, it seems unlikely. So that kind of narrows our options then as we approach the school year. So one of the big pieces is the county health department and their guidance. The other difficult thing is that we're trying to manage uncertainty for a lot of folks. We're trying to manage uncertainty for our staff. We're trying to manage uncertainty for our parents. And, the virus is going to do what it does without our consideration. It's going to act as it does. And like I said before, the conditions in the community, while within our collective ability to affect, they're not ours to determine solely as a school district. And that means that we don't know exactly what the conditions are going to be on September 1st. It could be in the red, it could be in the orange. If things really turned around, maybe it could be different, but it's highly unlikely. In order to deliver the high quality instruction that we want to, teachers need time to plan. And that time to plan is best used if they can plan for one mode of instruction as opposed to 2 or 3 different ways of learning. So if we give teachers the time to plan for one mode of instruction really well, we know that we'll be able to have a really successful start to our school year. Parents also need to know what to plan for, and they need a little bit of certainty so that they can make good decisions. Given that we anticipate the county compass to be in red or orange, we know that starting virtually, we can do that. We know that that's a possibility. And so that's one of the few areas of certainty we can create for ourselves. We can start virtually regardless, whether we're in the red or orange. We can give teachers the time to plan really high quality instruction, and we can give parents some certainty about what they need to do for those first 30 days of the school year. That being said, we want to do everything possible to get students into school buildings, as soon as we can, because we know that that is the best place for many, many of our students. So those first 30 days, right now, we're planning on being virtual. Teachers will be allowed in the building to facilitate distance learning, but it's really focusing on that high quality distance learning. The county did mention in their latest draft that there may be some emergency services allowed on our property in the red. And we're thinking about our most vulnerable populations there, handfuls of students that will need some specialized services that can only be done face-to-face. And so we're thinking about what that could look like to ensure that our most vulnerable students get the help they need at school. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like. And then at some point, things will change in our county. We're hopeful that, by mid-September, things change. Maybe we're looking at going back from red to the orange sooner than later if we all get on board and can help out. But we also want to make sure that we're not flip-flopping back and forth between instructional models, especially early on when we haven't really gotten good at doing the one thing we were committed to initially. And so what we want to do is take a measured approach to reopening our school buildings. We don't want to do so before it's safe. And so we plan on looking at the last 2 weeks of September to guide us as to what we're going to do in October. If we're in the orange for those last 2 weeks, then within those new guidelines, we feel we might be able to safely reopen for some portions of our school in October if we continue to be in the orange. And so we're hopeful that conditions change, that we're able to safely reopen at that point. And from that point forward, we'll continue to monitor and try and create a buffer, so to speak, so we don't get a flip-flopping back and forth in and out in a way that would be very disruptive to teaching and learning. The only other thing that's of interest, in terms of the virtual learning, and we can talk more about what things might look like when we return next. One thing that is of concern to a lot of folks is co-curriculars, and what do we do if we're in the orange and some things are opened up? Would we allow in-person co-curriculars as needed? Our commitment is to doing what is safe according to the county. And so while right now we're committed to 30 days of online or virtual instruction for all students, we may consider opening up some co-curriculars based on the county's guidance for safety and the WIAA's guidance for safety. Those plans are still in the works. We still have to figure some of that out. But once again, we're always guided by what the county says is safe. And right now we want some consistency and certainty, but we're going to evaluate co-curriculars as we get closer. We also know that, right now we're in the red. There isn't really anything we can do co-curricular wise. We would like to preserve that hope for our students that we can have a full season maybe, or a partial season. And so we're also investigating flipping our fall sports to the spring and our spring sports to the summer. That comes with its own complications, but we're looking at every possibility to keep that possibility alive, because we know that athletics and other co-curriculars like show choir and other things are a huge part of students' identity, and we want to preserve that mental health as much as we can throughout the school year. So for the board, I'll open it up to questions in terms of our start to the school year, instruction in the red category of the compass, and then we can talk about if we get an opportunity to return to classrooms, what that will look like.
Thank you, Dr. Engel. I have a few questions, unless other board members want to jump in. You mentioned a moment ago teachers would be in the buildings. Can you qualify what is meant by that?
Absolutely. We know that for many of our teachers, access to their resources to be able to teach is very important. And so using the guidance from the county, whether it's wearing masks in the buildings or being physically distanced, we would consider allowing teachers access to their classrooms so that they would be able to effectively teach in a virtual setting. We're still figuring out the details of what that may look like, but we would want to ensure that staff are safe there and not jeopardizing the health of everyone. But we know that that may be a more effective place to teach from.
Okay. But there's no discussion at this point about requirements in terms of teachers must be in their schools teaching a certain number of hours per week, or that's not what's meant by that. Okay.
Nope, not at all. At this point, we know that there's many teachers who have, health concerns, and even being in the building with other staff members would be a concern. And so we want to make sure that all the options are available as best we can.
The second question that I have, I'm just curious. A colleague, for example, mentioned, I think it was it University of Michigan today decided that, or the community decided they were going to go virtual because of the impact of students coming back to campus. And we know that that is a concern here in our local community as well. For example, UWL students returning. I'm just wondering if there's any communication between institutions of higher learning right now in La Crosse.
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to meet with the COVID pandemic planning team, or a few members of it, at UW La Crosse. And we've had some, discussions about common situations, things they're doing, just an information sharing sort of thing. And then the county is aware of, the UW La Crosse's plans and the impact that is likely to have on our community. I don't want to think it's a foregone conclusion that when our UWL students come back, things are going to get worse. I believe that they're just as committed to our community as anyone. However, recent data would indicate that the 20 to 29-year-old group of students or group of members in our community is contributing to a higher rate of COVID. So, there's some evidence that would be a concern.
Are there questions from board members?
Yeah, I've got a question, if you will. Dr. Engel, my question is concerning students with disabilities. Often they are they're the students that benefit more from in-person schooling, so this is a rather challenging time for our students with disability. What are we doing, and what can be done for students with disabilities, rather?
Excellent question. We've learned a lot from the spring semester, in terms of the challenges that are out there for our students with disabilities. Engagement is a large part of it, and then also access to specialized services. We're hopeful that the carve out that the county is providing for emergency daytime services will allow us to provide some of those critical in-person pieces for students with disabilities, whether that's occupational therapy or speech language, or maybe it's some longer instruction for a student with intellectual disabilities. There's a number of different ways we could utilize that if it's available to us. Additionally, because of what we've learned, we know that some of our strategies to engage students will need to be expanded so that we create a learning environment where students that struggled online find more relevant instruction and better access and more contact with their teachers.
Sure, thank you. I've got another question. So you did say that our teachers are going to start preparing, right? They need time to prepare, rather. Do they know that time to start preparing or being comfortable, rather, with online teaching? Because many of them that I speak to, they didn't go to school to do online instruction, right? So it's hard for them. Do they know that the time to start trying to get comfortable with online virtual teaching is now? What is your administration saying to teachers that are uncomfortable with online teaching?
Absolutely. This is a whole new world for a lot of our teachers, and going online was a challenge for many of them. Once again, we've learned some good lessons from the spring. We did not know the conditions under which we would be able to start until this week, and we wanted to present to the school board first before we reach out to our staff directly and to our community. So the plan is to get something out to staff tonight to let them know the circumstances. And we've been planning, intensely the last couple of days about how we're going to provide opportunities for teachers to be prepared for online learning. One of the critical things that we're doing is we're adding 2 professional development days into August so that staff have time to learn about our new online learning management system, Canvas. Also, so they have an opportunity to go through the Apple Learning suite of tools, and then time to implement their curriculum with those platforms. And so we've doubled our professional development time. We're providing opportunities for that online learning early in August and giving teachers options depending on their schedules on when to complete that learning. So as soon as, I think the second week of August, we'll be able to provide opportunities for teachers to start learning the tools that they need and getting their curriculum ready for an online format.
Awesome, thank you. I've only got one more question here. Concerns to students and families. How are we going to help access broadband internet for kids who do not have this privilege, if you will, or a luxury, rather? Have we figured that out, or what?
We're working with local service providers who have various programs to provide internet to some families as an option. We're also procuring hotspots for families where that is not an option so that we can provide that directly to families. And then working on a variety of other solutions as well. That is a huge challenge and one of the major points of advocacy I have in terms of our state and federal government to be able to provide broadband to every student. It is no longer a luxury, as you say, Mr. Turner. It is a necessity if we're going to educate students in this day and age. And so we're making every effort to make that a possibility. Once again, those emergency services, if that carve out is available for families for whom it is impossible to acquire internet service for, that would be another option for some limited in-person contact in order to ensure that they get the education they deserve.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Engel.
Dr. Engel, this is Brad. Want to thank you and all the administration and all others who are working to put things together. Kind of answered the broadband question. I know it's been a concern of mine, and I'm bringing that before the board as a state issue if we get to meet as a WASB board in Milwaukee. But I think that's an important key element to all of this. My other question is about food distribution. What kind of discussion has gone there? Because I know a lot of our students are dependent upon the nutrition that we provide for them. And I know we've done a number of things, all the way through summer here. In fact, I still see the bus come up every noon at Emerson. So what kinds of things I'm sure we've learned from some of the things in the spring, but what are we looking for? And I know that also had broadband in some cases.
Yeah, we're able to put internet devices on our buses. That's not a great solution. It is a potential temporary solution for some. But once again, like you had indicated, we learned a lot about how to distribute meals to students over the spring and the summer, and we intend to continue that, as long as students are not physically present. And then we're also considering, how do we do that for our families that are choosing the Cooley Region Virtual Academy? They deserve access to healthy lunches and breakfast as well. So we're going to continue to look at how we distribute food to every family in our school district and make it accessible. And that's going to take on a hybrid model as well. Once students return to school, there will still be some that are at home, and they deserve access to that food as well. Using our existing system has been effective, but we may have to expand that, look at more points of access. We want to make sure that, a first grader and a fourth grader that are walking from their home are able to safely access that food, either at a school building or a park or a intersection that's safe for those students.
Thanks. And then one other question. I know, talking with staff and teachers in the district in past years, it's been a challenge to get good substitute teachers. That's a whole nother issue. Has there been any thoughts for that, as far as now as what can be done if teachers need to take some leave because of either them getting sick or family members getting sick, and what kind of substitute opportunities are we going to be able to have?
Yeah, that is a critical concern. A lot of our existing substitutes are older, oftentimes retired teachers. And so they're in a population that may have more vulnerability to COVID. So they may be less inclined to substitute teach than they have in the past. Some of the strategies we've used historically, where if a teacher needed to be gone for just the last hour of the day, you might combine two classes for a little while to, take care of art and a recess. That's not going to be an option either, because physical distancing will be a necessity. We're going to have to get very flexible and creative in terms of substitute teaching. We're hopeful that when a teacher may have to quarantine, they may not be ill, but they've been exposed to somebody who tested positive. They themselves may not show any symptoms. They might not have access to a test for coronavirus right away, but they may still be able to teach from home. And so the need for in-classroom supervision may not necessarily need to be a certified teacher, but maybe a qualified teacher assistant would be able to manage the classroom dynamics while the teacher was piped in online and able to teach from home and still be able to be paid in that setting. So when we do return to school, that is an option we're looking at to expand the variety of substitute needs we would have, depending on how we utilize our instructional coaches or title teachers. There may be opportunities for some limited substitute teaching there. They've done that work in the past. However, they have important jobs to carry out as well, and we need them to do the traditional work that they've done also. It's really going to be an all hands on deck sort of situation. I haven't substitute taught in about 15 years, but if need be, I think all of us are willing to pitch in to ensure that kids have the supervision they need, and we're able to get the education that kids deserve.
Thank you.
This is Dawn. I wanted to say thank you for trying to be flexible and not only keeping the kids safe, but in the end, it affects the families. Knowing what it's like to actually have somebody COVID positive in your house, it kind of throws everything upside down, not being able to go anywhere. And it's not just 2 weeks of quarantine. It can be over a month, because it's per the county, 2 weeks after that person gets well, et cetera. So if you can imagine the role of just time that will be gone, and kids that could be sick, and parents that could be affected, and teachers. I know that a lot of people either really are looking forward to the school, and there are many who are like, I'd rather be in school. But in the overall, we have to think of everybody. It's not just about the students. It's about the parents and the teachers and their kids. So I want to thank you for trying to do a very large job in this very unique situation in our world, and trying to come up with a lot of different scenarios. I know that you're not going to get everything right. You're going to try your best. The administration and the team and the teachers are going to do the best that they can for the moment that they can, without knowing all of the answers. So thank you for putting yourselves out there and for trying your best to educate our kids and keep our community safe.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what, before we move on to the next topic, Dr. Engel, are you going to go on to what school is going to look like when we get back?
Yes.
Okay, before you do that, pardon me.
Yes.
By way of like the devices, and do we have enough devices for all of the children?
That's a
iPads and
yeah, and that's something I need to highlight, and I almost forgot.
Sure.
So with our CARES Act funds, we purchased iPads for kindergarten through 3rd grade.
Nice.
Something we did not have previously. So for our school district, we will be able to provide an iPad for every student, kindergarten through 12th grade. So we are one-to-one, nearly district-wide. We do not have iPads for our 4K students, but it's not necessarily developmentally appropriate at that age anyway. And so to continue a play-based learning approach at 4K, we'll be using other methods of instruction as opposed to iPads.
Sure, thank you.
This is Jeff. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I'm curious as to what, I missed the first part of your opening, and I'm assuming all schools, like Alaska, Holman, West Salem, are they going virtual as well?
As county superintendents, that is the proposal we are presenting to our school boards. School boards have different views, and for us as superintendents, the best scenario as we open the school year, but it may end up being different in different places. I can't guarantee anything.
And then, can you explain what's teaching going to actually look like?
Yeah, it could look a variety of ways depending on the grade level. Our goal, I think, is to try and provide a synchronous option for students where they can meet with their teacher and maybe some other classmates online. At the same time, we know that will not always be a possibility for every student. And so we want to ensure that our instruction is also available anytime online as well. For some students, it may involve us sending home packets of information so that they have physical copies of things to supplement what they're able to see online. We're still working through the exact details of what instruction looks like. It could be there's some school districts that are using an online bell schedule, and you have to check in every hour, and you have to, and it's all synchronous where you have to visually be there. There are other school districts that feel that that's not appropriate for their student body, or possible with teaching staff having children at home. So looking at more asynchronous methods where teachers produce content, they make it available, and then open themselves to office hours at various points throughout the day to answer questions and work with students. So we're looking at all of those models and looking at the needs of our student body and the capabilities of our staff to determine the best instructional mode.
Okay, thank you. Because I was gonna, I mean, just from being a parent, like what happened in the spring, just and many parents that I talked to, it just didn't work for their kids. It wasn't really teaching going on. It was assignments out there. If you have a question about them, I'll try to answer your questions type of thing. It wasn't interactive at all. And I think having check-in like on the hour, I don't understand why we can't operate in a way that kids, you know, you have your class schedule that you get and you're supposed to be somewhere at a specific time, why we can't operate in that fashion. And another, I guess, question was the grading system, because I felt like we made a mistake in the spring. Of course, we didn't know, you know, it's flying, we haven't experienced it before, but by telling kids it's a pass-fail system at that point in time, I know kids, including my own and their friends, just, it doesn't matter how good they do. They don't have to put any effort in. It was just minimal work just to get a pass grade. And I think that was, I think that's why you saw like 30% of the kids completing their assignments and stuff like that. And so I think for this to be successful, it has to be way more interactive, way more engaging. And I would encourage you guys to figure out how to make that happen.
I entirely agree with you. A lot of what we did in the spring did not work. We're taking those lessons and we're going to drastically improve, you know, what we're able to offer.
And then I guess I would also question, like, I don't feel like, I mean, it's, you know, I can pay for college and go to UWL and I can sit in a classroom and I can live in a dorm, and the county apparently can't control that. And I work at UWL. And then our kids have to stay home. It just sends such a mixed message that we're so hardcore following the county health guides, but then the other colleges aren't really following the county health guidelines. And so, you know, I think reality is, I mean, if we're going to follow the county, things aren't going to change once school comes back. I mean, I firmly believe we're going to end up with more cases and we're always going to be stuck in the red. And we should almost go to what you were saying about Ann Arbor did and other schools, just go virtual all year, just say it up front. We're going to be virtual all year. And so parents, as you said in the beginning, how parents need to plan, kids need to plan, get that certainty in there. I think you guys should start having those conversations, you know, now to prepare for that, because that's in reality, that's probably what's going to end up happening. If 7 cases of COVID a day or whatever the county rules are now to be in red, it's not very many.
Yeah, we're gonna. That's the name of the game. Is like adapting to the conditions as we see them. And if we get closer to October and it doesn't seem likely that we're going to be able to return to in-person learning, then we can definitely make that commitment, you know, to let parents know. However, we know that we serve most of our students best by offering in-person learning, and so we want to leave that possibility open wherever possible. We also know that by going to virtual learning, it creates a large impact on a lot of our parents economically, with their ability to work at their jobs, to provide childcare, the cost of providing childcare. And so we're sensitive to that as well.
So with the virtual learning, so we got the virtual academy going on. So a student could sign up for the virtual academy and then they have to stay there until there's face-to-face instruction. They couldn't start virtually and then do whatever the alternative system is. We're not pushing all kids into the virtual academy, are we?
We're not pushing all students into the virtual academy. We're requiring a 1 semester commitment. The reason for that is we have to shift our teaching staff to support that virtual academy. And if, you know, students filter back and forth or come back to the face-to-face, we'd have to start shifting teachers to account for the county's requirements for classroom size. And so that's one of the large reasons. We have almost 600 students requesting the virtual academy at this point. You know, that is a lot of teachers that will have to shift to the virtual academy for this fall semester. And to have the consistency necessary to maintain that, we need a 1 semester commitment. we'll be able to reassess in December for January, and then some teachers may shift back into the classroom, or it might go the other direction.
So yeah, I'm guessing those virtual academy numbers will increase once this becomes more public about not going to face to face. And so I guess the impact, what if all school district kids decided to do virtual academy? Would that academy be able to take all the kids?
Yes, we would transition all of our teachers to be virtual academy teachers. So we would just shift our teaching staff to that. We're staffing the virtual academy with our own teachers by and large. So if there's a need for 20 teachers in the virtual academy, then we'll shift 20 teachers to that platform. If it's 600, then we'll shift 600.
Okay. And then the last question, I'll be done. Regarding the virtual academy, when you guys start educating the parents, will there be more information about I'm not really bet how the virtual academy will actually work. So I, as a parent, would like to see what the virtual academy, what that looks like, and then what that other model looks like in terms of instructional design, how that instruction is going to be delivered. For me to make a decision which way I would want to go, I would need to see both of those options kind of in a piece of paper, very clearly as to which model is going to look like, so I can make a decision.
Absolutely. That is one of the key things we need to get out to parents. And we've been waiting on the county's guidance to a certain extent to get to a point where we can provide that. We do have a document that we'll be sharing out that I think maybe already is shared out on our webpage. So if parents, we're directing parents to our school website where we have a reopening page, and there is the Cooley Region Virtual Academy handbook, an FAQ, and a comparison of the modes of instruction so that parents get an idea of a comparison between them.
All right. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much.
This is Juan. I just have one question. You've taken a lot of questions, so I don't want to prolong the the questioning process here. But the one question I have is in regards to waiting end of September and then making a decision whether are we going to go back face to face or stay online. I'm just wondering why the decision wasn't to end at the quarter. It just seems like that's a much cleaner ending, because I'm just thinking back to my days of teaching math at the K-12 level. You never know where that's going to end. It could be in the middle of a chapter. It could be at the end of a unit. It could be at the beginning of a unit. So I just see that as being a much harder planning opportunity than a clear break like a quarter. So, and if you answered it, I apologize, I missed it. But if you could just share with that information, that'd be great.
Absolutely. As county superintendents, we discussed going a semester. We discussed going a quarter. We discussed 30 school days. We discussed a lot of different options. In this case, our goal was to be a little more flexible in terms of the conditions in the county. If it's safe to come back to school, let's say that we're in the yellow, well, then we want to provide that in-person instruction for our parents as soon as possible. I think given the conditions we're currently seeing and the guidelines that the county is likely to put forth, we will probably not be able to provide in-person instruction in the orange or the red for high school students and maybe even middle school students. So it's likely that it'll be a quarter or longer. However, we want to be responsive to the conditions in our community. We want to provide the best possible education. And so that shorter period of time we felt was better so that we could respond to that and help parents out, with that in-person learning. We felt that a 2-week lead time, if it's orange on the 16th, that gives people notice, hey, in 2 weeks, we might be switching. And if it's orange the next week on the 23rd, that gives us another week. All right, if it's orange next week, so that gives another week of notice. And then on the 30th, if it's orange again, then we know that next week we're coming back. And so then it even still gives people about 5 days notice in order to shift their plans. We need about 2 weeks lead time in order to arrange transportation, change our food service plans, get safety protocols, do deep cleaning. There's a lot of things that need to happen in those 2 weeks for us to be prepared for students to return. We just didn't want to abandon hope for parents that absolutely need face-to-face instruction for their livelihoods. And so our goal is to provide that in-person instruction if we can, but also being reasonable in terms of a time frame and a reentry period.
Thank you for that. I know you are trying to do the impossible balance here. And so I think no matter what we do, there are going to be some people who are going to be affected negatively. And so long as I think our heart's in the right place, we are trying our best to support all. That's going to be the most important thing we can offer. So I appreciate all the thoughtfulness.
Any further questions or comments? Dr. Engel, do you have anything else, or we're going to move to the next item on the agenda?
I think we can talk about what it'll look like when we do come back. So based on our current understanding with the county, and like I said, we don't have a formal update yet, but based on the current draft, when we do return, all students and staff in grades 1 through 12 will be required to wear masks in green, yellow, orange, and red on the county compass. So we anticipate wearing masks until a vaccine is found, most likely. So that'll be the norm in our school districts, unless we learn more and we find out that that's not necessary. But at this time, we anticipate wearing masks throughout the school day in grades 1 through 12. So our littlest students, we know that the epidemiology shows that it doesn't transmit as much. The possibilities of wearing a mask all day is a little more difficult. So for KK, it may not be required all day. We also know that there's some students that have medical conditions and other things that are going on that will prevent them from wearing a mask all day or even at all. And we're sensitive to that, and we will work with those students, to create a safe environment. We might have face shields or other options for those students to help them and others be safe. But that is all in line with the county guidance. They are likely to dictate that masks are worn throughout the time that the compass is in operation. We anticipate that school buildings may reopen in Orange to a blended format of instruction. The critical pieces of that are that students must remain in cohorts with limited intermingling. So we don't want students to come into contact with other students if they don't need to. That will prevent transmission of the disease and reduce the contact tracing efforts that are needed. For elementary students, given the likely classroom size limits, we feel that we will probably be able to offer 5 days of instruction in the Orange for 4K through 5. For middle and high school students in a blended format, that is going to be much more difficult. The intermingling part is the one that really gets tricky. At the high school, you transition classes. You might start off in English 9 and then go to an algebra class and then go to a tech ed class. You're seeing different students across the building. At this time, we're not sure that we can prevent intermingling to such an extent that we would be able to have face-to-face instruction, even in Orange, for our high school students. And similar concerns exist for the middle school. We're examining A/B schedules for both groups and thinking about things in novel ways. But at this time, it's going to be very difficult to offer in-person instruction with the new guidance in the Orange for middle and high school students. We may get there with middle school. But safety is our first concern. If we can't meet the county's guidance, then we can't safely reopen our school buildings. But we're going to do everything we can to examine that. So, in some, 4K through 5 in Orange, it would be cohorts that don't intermingle with other students in the building and masks all day. And for middle and high school, we're working on A/B schedules, but it may be virtual in the orange as well. In yellow and green, if we get to that point, we anticipate being able to bring all students back with more limited precautions. We'd still be wearing masks. We would keep cohorts at the elementary level. We would limit intermingling wherever possible. We'd limit gatherings of larger than 50 students. We would do everything we can to limit the spread of the disease and follow all the health recommendations that the county puts out.
So I've got one question before we move on. So this might be a Joe Lavina question, but if you will, do you know we figured out our position of ask for our students?
Could you repeat that, Mr. Turner? You broke up just a little.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you know if we figured out the acquisition for masks for our students? It might be a Joe Lavina question, but just thought I'd ask.
Absolutely. Yep, we have purchased thousands of masks. We recently did so. We're preparing for that. We have CARES Act money to help in the acquisition of those. Given that we provide a free, appropriate public education, it's our responsibility to ensure students have masks. It will be an ongoing expense. While we may provide a mask, 2 masks for every child, they will lose them.
Sure.
They will become destroyed. They will wear out over washes. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge to ensure that every day we have a mask for every child.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? This is Jeff.
Absolutely.
Are we legally bound, the district legally bound to follow the county health guidelines?
At this point, the county has issued guidelines. They have not yet issued orders. At the same time, our legal counsel and our insurance carriers have all indicated that we limit our liability if we follow the county's guidelines. So that is where those important entities are telling us to look for guidance.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question about space at high schools, because you mentioned that even passing between classes, and I get that. But like Central is built for like 1,500 students, I believe, and we have like 1,000 in there. And if some of them go virtual, and like Logan is also under, I don't know, I think Logan was built for like 1,300 or 1,200, and we have, what, 700 in there? So I'm curious, it's a lot of space.
Absolutely. We're
unused.
Yep, we're going to look at every possibility in terms of spreading students out in the orange and novel schedules. The difficulty comes down to the intermingling bit. If a student comes into contact with 20 students in a day in their own classroom, we can isolate any quarantine to that group or even smaller. We know who they've come into contact with. Contact tracing's easy. The concern that the county has is if a student comes into contact with 40, 80, 100, 200 students, at that point, if a student is ill, test positive, we may have to quarantine the entire building. And if that happens on a regular basis, it's not going to be possible to even reopen. So that's where the county is giving their guidance in terms of the intermingling. If we can figure out how to prevent that, then I think we could definitely safely reopen. There's some, novel solutions out there, like a J term where you have a single class per day, and for 3 or 6 weeks, you just learn about English 9 or algebra. I don't know that is sustainable for many of our students or our teachers, but it is a possibility. Others have looked at, extended block schedules where you have a class in the morning and a second class in the afternoon, and you do that for 9 weeks. That's another possibility where we could limit that. We're still exploring those options under the county's new guidance. We've been exploring those for months, but there's a lot of logistics that go into that. And so we're just trying to parse through what will be best for our students and our teachers.
Thank you.
I think it's hard to think about a kid getting COVID. I don't think anybody realizes the impact that it can have when it gets brought home or it spreads to multiple families. In my house, I have somebody who had COVID, and that has impacted 3 people in my house from being able to work for almost a month. And luckily, they're in an environment where somebody is there to support them. But if they were not in a place where they could be supported, we might be spreading things because they may say, I have to go to work. I can't live unless I go to work. With things that are happening at the national level and unemployment and everything is just kind of so jumbled, we really have to be cautious. And that is why I am praising you as administrators and as teachers and as students for trying to just do your best to minimize the spread, because I know that we're talking about education and kids and how difficult it is, and parents have to work. Yes, parents have to work during the day, but if they are on quarantine, they won't be able to work. There's options if your kid's at home working or doing school to potentially be able to go to work or make for babysitting. But if your whole family is under quarantine, you're stuck. And it's a different mindset once you're in it, that you can't go to the store, you can't go to a meeting, you can't go and do those things that you would normally do. So I just want people to realize what it's like if you have it within your household. It definitely changes your perspective, your life. Listening to the person that's sick, coughing and just hacking up a lung, and I'm just glad that they're not in the hospital. I'm trying to think positive. It could be a heck of a lot worse, but we're all here, we're all alive, and we're in a safe environment. It could be worse, and I'm just thankful that our school district is really taking not just the students, but the families into consideration. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of needs to balance. And, I'm afraid that, a student or a staff member may contract COVID and be very sick, and God forbid, the worst happen. At the same time, as an administrator who's been a principal and a teacher, I can already see the kids who are going to suffer because they don't have access to school. The families who need quality education for their students that are homeless, don't have access to good food, that suffer from abuse and neglect, or just need a safe place to be with their peers. And so, these decisions are not easy. It leaves you awake at night and with a sick feeling in your stomach, either direction you go, because that there are families and students that need one or the other option to have the best possible future. And so know that all of us as administrators struggle mightily with these decisions and just trying to navigate the best possible path in a very uncertain time.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, Ms. Como. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Engel? Anything else for us, Dr. Engel, before we move on?
So our plan as we move forward is to put out a summary of what we talked about tonight to our staff this evening, to get this information out widely to our parents tomorrow, and to direct them to the website for continual updates. We're going to develop an FAQ that answers more of the details and the minutia so that people get a better understanding. A lot of the questions that individuals have around what looks like when we come back are a little less important, at least immediately, now that we know that we're going to be starting virtually. And so that we hope will give parents some necessary information to determine whether or not the Cooley Region Virtual Academy is their best choice, or the best possible traditional education we can provide. So the website will be the place to go for updates and information. Information will continually be posted there as we learn more. And, the Same message applies. We're going to continue to be responsive to the conditions in the community. We need to be flexible. We wish we could provide more certainty, but that's beyond our control.